Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com. This is the Darkstream. Thanks for swinging by tonight. And we're going to talk about the gift that simply refuses to stop giving. We're going to talk about Dr. Jordan Peterson, who has apparently decided that what the world needs is an ongoing impression of Wormtongue. Wormtongue, of course, I refer to Grima Wormtongue, the character out of Tolkien. And it's really amazing to see how somebody like Jordan Peterson simply doesn't understand that people pay attention to what you say. That people pay attention to what you said yesterday. People pay attention to what you wrote. You know, he seems to think that as long as you fold, spindle, and mutilate the ideas that are coming out of your mouth, as long as you pretend to be thinking very seriously, to be really debating with yourself and thinking very hard like you've never ever thought about the subject before, then you can say whatever you want. Because, you know, you don't think you're right. It's just a thought experiment. It's just an idea, just, you know, contemplating various options and throwing ideas out there. It's total bullshit. It is bullshit from the start. It is bullshit all through. It is bullshit at the finish. Let me make it clear for you. Jordan Peterson is a used car salesman, except the used car he is selling is himself. Okay? He's not your dad. He's not your uncle. He is somebody who is making a lot of money off of you and people like you because you're dumb enough to fall for this guy. Okay? Look, I'm a writer. I'm an editor. And I knew before I finished the first chapter of 12 Rules of Life that Jordan Peterson was an intellectual charlatan. Now, I will admit that I wasn't aware that he was a complete fucking lunatic until I read Maps of Meaning. I didn't realize that there was something genuinely wrong with him until I read Maps of Meaning. And I didn't realize how totally full of shit he is until I watched some of his videos. Look, when you see him pull this bullshit move about, no, I never thought about this before. I'm really just working my way through the same fucking thing that I've been asked about 50 times before, but I want you to think that I'm really trying to puzzle my way through this, and I don't want you to hold me accountable for anything that I say. I mean, you should be embarrassed. You should be irritated with yourself for listening to this guy at all. You know, oh, but he's done so much good for people. He's told them to clean their room. Big fucking deal. Your mother never told you to clean your room? You know, you never figured out that, you know, maybe you should brush your teeth, you know? I mean, if you look at what Jordan Peterson does, he does the same routine all the time. He's a fucking con man. I mean, look at what he wrote in response to having put a foot in it. You know, I mean, he fucked up so badly with this Kavanaugh thing that not only did he realize it right away, but so did all of his little friends. And they all came rushing out there to help him. Oh, we're having a fascinating discussion, and oh, we're just so interested in Jordan's thought experiment, and all this kind of bullshit. You know, and that is what it is. I do not use that term lightly. It is total nonsense. Now let's look at what he notes on my Kavanaugh tweet. Now notice that he doesn't have to tell you which Kavanaugh tweet it was, because we all know. You know, we all know how badly he screwed the pooch here. He knows it. That's why he wrote this. Okay? Now think about this first. Why did he post that tweet in the first place? Okay? Before you get into thinking about his various excuses and stuff, think about why he posted it in the first place. Was anybody asking him to fix the system for appointing Supreme Court judges? Was there a single person on the planet? The guy is a fucking Canadian. You know? It's not his business. It literally has nothing to do with him. And so suddenly you've got this Canadian who has to weigh in and come up with a solution for how how the Supreme Court justices are selected and confirmed. You know, this is nonsense. So, okay, let's start this. Notes on my Kavanaugh tweet. This week, I responded to a Twitter thread consisting of a conversation between Brett Weinstein and his brother Eric Weinstein, managing director at Thiel Capital and man who coined the term intellectual dark web. I just want to point out that Owen Benjamin has it right. You know, the intellectual dark web is, I mean, it's actually a great term because it's so cringe-making, especially when it's applied to these feckless, cowardly, you know, leftists in rightist clothing, but you know, these anti-nationalists trying to defang the nationalists before they all get kicked out and sent back to their homelands. But the and by the way, that is the whole point of the intellectual dark web. You understand that. They are desperately trying to stop the trend to nationalism, which, when you look at it from the European perspective, is laughable. Absolutely laughable. So as Owen Benjamin calls them, he calls them the douche weasels. I think that in honor of Jordan Peterson's relationship with his beautiful and apparently very tasty cousin, as well as his grandmother, who really should consider personal grooming, and in light of the nature of the relationship between the various members of the group, I think that it is more correctly referred to as the incestuous douche weasels, because these guys each other and talk about each other almost as often as the New Atheist did. So anyhow, we're going on. This position is held in varying forms by nearly everyone thoughtful. Thoughtful, total BS lefty word. All leftists think they are thoughtful, despite the fact that they all think exactly what they're told to think. With whom I'm speaking, what divides these folks is which way to break the symmetry. There is no symmetry, okay? The trend is nationalist. The trend is to the right. That's why the left is so desperate for immigration, because they are losing all of the native populations over time. You cannot be a white man and get ahead in the Democrat Party from now on. You're done. And we're seeing the same thing happen in Italy. We're seeing the same thing happen in the UK. We're seeing a major transformation now. And these guys are like claiming, oh, well, it's all symmetry and stuff. No, it's not. It's not even close anymore. But honest people see deep reasons that both outcomes are not healthy or workable. Okay, this is like bad fantasy. Okay, this is the balance. Too much good is bad and too much bad is bad. You have to have just the right amount of bad. I mean, Jordan Peterson's whole order and chaos thing is total bullshit. A society survives just fine in stasis. In fact, that's what the globalists want to do. They want to put the world in stasis because they want to stay in charge. That's why they're fine with science being perverted. That's why they're fine with global standards of living and working wages being stagnant since 1973. Jordan Peterson's core thesis about order and chaos is observably wrong. The history of China proves it. The history of Japan proves it. Especially when you start factoring in things like immigration and that sort of thing, because that's what actually does destroy a society. Anyhow, Peterson goes on, Brett stated his belief that there was no good way out of the present Kavanaugh conundrum. Both outcomes are completely unacceptable. Okay, again, bullshit. I took that to mean that failing to confirm Kavanaugh would, 1, dangerously embolden those who, 1, believe that we should dispense with the presumption of innocence for those accused of sexual misconduct, and 2, provide a victory to those inclined to weaponize such accusations for personal political gain. Okay, that part's true. While confirming him would place someone on the Supreme Court whose every judgment would be employed by the grievance industry for decades in the future as more evidence for the utter corruption of the white male patriarchy and could contribute in that manner to continual civil unrest. Okay, Jordan, I'll give you a little bit, I'll cut you a little bit of slack for that. For 2 reasons. Number 1, you're not an American, and you clearly don't know jack shit about American history. Number 2, you're badly read. You know very little about history. This is obvious almost every time you open your worm-tongue little mouth. Okay? If you have paid any attention to American history, then you would know that the Supreme Court has been a locus for civil unrest and political tension for over a century. Does anyone recall a switch in time saves 9? Do you know what that refers to? That refers to FDR. And the switch in time was basically the court deciding suddenly that all of FDR's very unconstitutional measures were constitutional because he had made it clear that he was going to pack the court if they didn't. So, anyhow, the fact that both outcomes are completely unacceptable is, number 1, wrong. Number 2, irrelevant. One of those unacceptable outcomes already happened. And guess what? The left is not going to behave any differently with Kavanaugh on the court than it would have with anybody else. Because anyone that a Republican president would nominate is going to be unacceptable unless they start ruling like a Democrat-appointed justice. So, Eric then stated in response, we need a genius healer we just don't have. See, look, they're always trying to tick in the olum. It's always about the healing somebody else. I asked myself a question after reading these posts. Is there an alternative to confirming or not confirming Kavanaugh? Well, sure, there's lots of alternatives, but none of them are actually reasonable. When a choice appears starkly binary, a third path appears impossible by definition, but might possibly still be worth seeking. Now, what do we call... This is very interesting for those of you who keep insisting that, well, no, Jordan's not a socialist anymore. He was a socialist in his youth, but he saw the wrongness of his ways, and now he's post-ideological. Really? Okay. Who knows what it's called when you have two paths, and then you put them together and you find a third path? Can anyone name that? Come on, folks. Somebody has to know this. We have the thesis, we have the antithesis, and when you put the thesis together with the antithesis, what do you get? You get the synthesis. Do you know what this is called? No, this, well, it's no, sometimes it's better known as Marxian dialectic. That is straight out of Marx from Hegel. There's no chance that, there's no chance that somebody who used to be the member of the Socialist Party got it from Hegel. Okay? I very much doubt that Peterson has read much Hegel, but I am absolutely confident that he's very familiar with that Marxian dialectic. That's what Marxists love to do. They're always going on about this. By the way, there was someone else who used to use the same approach to come up with a third way, and it was actually called the Third Way, and it was also a former socialist by the name of Benito Mussolini. So if you, the next time that Jordan starts whining about people calling him a right-wing extremist, we can say, hey, look, dude, you're a third-way fascist. There's actually a better case now for calling Jordan Peterson a fascist than Richard Spencer. So anyhow, now I don't think he's a fascist. I think that he's actually still a socialist. But anyhow, I thought he can't withdraw, so the only way was forward. But he's not cleared because 51% of the American public does not believe he's an appropriate choice. I'm not claiming, though, that CNN's poll is reliable. It doesn't matter. What matters is that there's very widespread opposition to his candidacy. Jordan, have you never paid attention to, any Supreme Court nomination before? Clarence Thomas, Robert Bork, whose last name actually entered into the language for precisely this kind of opposition. Jordan Peterson is a total fucking idiot. I mean, yes, he's a liar too. Yes, he's a charlatan too. But how can you possibly appeal to public opposition to a judge and claim that this is somehow something new, something that needs the intervention of the genius healer? No, nobody's perfect. He is a socialist. He's not a confused centrist. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. If you haven't read his UN report, then you don't know what you're talking about. He is a socialist who pretends to be a centrist. Okay? That's the whole point. Let's see here. Okay, it's not a good thing when there's general... Oh my gosh. I didn't notice this before. It's not a good thing when there's general discomfort with the manner in which something as important as the naming of a new Chief Justice is undertaken. Kavanaugh is not being nominated for the position of Chief Justice. Roberts is the Chief Justice, you moron. Kavanaugh is has been nominated and been confirmed for one of the other 8 seats. Okay? I mean, somebody archive that now, because you know, actually I'm going to make sure that it's archived right now, because you know that they're going to try to clean this up, because, you know, the super genius Jordan Peterson can't possibly be that completely and embarrassingly wrong about something that he has thought so deeply about. You know, he's thought so very deeply about this. Thinking and thinking and thinking. I don't know. I don't know what it means. Yeah, somebody pointed out the actual term, the actual title for Justice Kavanaugh is Associate Justice Kavanaugh. Now you might think, oh, well, you know, what does it matter? What does it matter? You know, the point is that this charlatan is attempting to convince you that he has thought very, very deeply about this. You know, he's just written 2,185 words to try to explain how deeply he has contemplated this thought experiment. And again, he's full of shit. You know, just like he tried to go on and talk about the Bible before he finished reading. He's going to teach everybody about the Bible, lecture about the Bible, which, oh, by the way, he hasn't actually read most of. All right? This guy doesn't do his homework. This guy doesn't know jack shit, except for a little bit about his areas of specialty. If you talk to people who are experts in Jung, if you talk to people who really know about Nietzsche, they will tell you the same thing. Jordan Peterson doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, people who know theology know that he doesn't know what he's talking about. The guy refers to stuff that has been debunked since the 19th century. Okay? So let's go on. So I thought, what might I do in such a position? Withdrawing prior to a full investigation did not constitute an acceptable option. But it's not clear that accepting the position, given the scale of opposition to my candidacy, in my simulation of it, which, by the way, is actually less than the opposition we have seen previously. Again, Clarence Thomas. Again, Robert Bork. Again, the various nominated folks who actually withdrew because, you know, something came up out of their past that was actually unacceptable. But what about the objections to this? Perhaps the Democratic opposition would mount a similar campaign against my putative successor. But that would prove virtually unassailable evidence for the purely manipulative and political motivation of the accused. We already knew that, forcing them to duplicate their strategy a second time. So what? It's the same strategy the Democrats use every single time. You know, the machinations on the part of the Democrats is already undeniable. The only way that you would possibly be able to deny it is to be, like Jordan Peterson, totally ignorant of the fact that this has been the norm since the 1980s, at least. Perhaps time is of the essence, and there'd be no way to place another candidate of conservative leaning on the bench before the November. It's not perhaps, there is no way. You know, and so it might be acceptable to wait a month and test the Democratic waters. We don't need to test the Democratic waters. They were tested when the God Emperor Trump was elected president. You know, it's always interesting. Globalists have a very obvious strategy, which is we should vote. And then if we don't like the results, then we should vote again. And we should vote again and again until we get the results we like, and then we should never stop. Then we should basically stop voting and make sure that nobody can, you know, kick us out of power again. You know, or as they used to say in South Africa, one man, one vote, one time. So perhaps it is necessary as an act of patriotism to sacrifice personal ambition for the broader welfare of the country. no, the welfare of the country needs somebody who is actually going to break the ties in the Supreme Court. So, so these were my ideas, and I responded, and he says, if confirmed, Kavanaugh should step down. This made many people unhappy. Some people positively inclined to me regarded my actions as a betrayal. And in response to that, here's a mea culpa. Now get this, Owen Benjamin, who, by the way, you guys were right. I didn't know who he was. I listened to his stuff. He's hilarious. He's awesome. And a very sharp guy. But one of the things that Owen said was that if he comes out and apologizes and just says, look, I screwed the pooch. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I'm sorry, that he would accept that. Now, I would not, just so we're clear. I would not accept that. I do not accept that. He is a charlatan. He is a wormtongue. You should not believe anything that the guy says whatsoever. But this is, somebody just actually figured it out. And then Owen said, but if he comes out and comes out with this, wordy sort of, but rationalization, justification, clarification, all this sort of thing. No, those are the two options, and the latter is unacceptable. Well, guess what he just did? He just, published this 2,000 plus word, it's not actually baffle garble this time. He clearly didn't have time to drop in the references to Jung and how he had a dream. He had a dream that his niece came to him naked in a dream and told him that he needed to rethink his position on Kavanaugh, and then cat-headed demons began playing instruments, and it rose into this vast cacophony and a mass orgy of naiads and dryads, and then he woke up and he realized that his position on telling Kavanaugh to decline the nomination was wrong. That was a bit random. Anyhow, the point is that Peterson did exactly what Owen said was unacceptable. And so this is just lunatic. And here's the best part. Now here's where it gets interesting. I mean, the only thing that's been interesting for me from this first part is the fact that he's such an idiot that he didn't realize that Kavanaugh is not the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Okay? But the interesting thing here is that what's his response? He threatens to quit Twitter. Okay? I mean, if there's ever been any doubt that Jordan Peterson is the epitome of a gamma male, it's this. Okay? He gets himself in trouble on Twitter. So his first reaction is, well, maybe I should quit Twitter. And what he's trying to do here is he's trying to get everybody to go, no, Jordan, no, don't quit Twitter. We would be reft without you. We would be reft without you. See, that's what he's going for. When gammas burn themselves, they immediately need positive reassurance. They need reassurance that they're not hated, right? And so he says, it was an error for me to use Twitter to express such thoughts, particularly in the condensed form that Twitter requires. So here's his non-apology apology. I was laboring yet again under the naive misapprehension. Oh, he's so naive. He's such a deep thinker and so innocent. I was laboring under the naive misapprehension and should have known better at this stage in the media war that I could offer an idea, not a certainty, for consideration on that platform. I should have known better, not least because I had already discussed the dangers of Twitter. See, he knew ahead of time. See, he may have made a mistake, but it's not really a mistake because he knew ahead of time that it was possibly a mistake, so it doesn't count. Again, classic gamma bullshit. I'd already discussed the dangers of Twitter, for example, with my son, who insisted over many months that if I engage in contentious issues online, that I should do so with a longer blog post and link to that with Twitter. Yeah, that's not going to save your ass. Trust me, I have a blog. You write something dumb on your blog, it'll be quoted on Twitter. I should have known better because Twitter appears primarily to be a forum where errors are magnified and outrage and vitriol almost certain to emerge whenever uncertainty about motive manifests itself. I honestly don't know what to do with Twitter. It's a very dangerous platform and may well be doing more harm than good. Well, then what are you doing on it, Jordan? Shame on you. Shame on you. You should quit Twitter. You are adding to the chaos. But I have something approaching 1 million followers. Oh, we get the little humble brag in there. I mean, seriously, this guy talks the way that high school girls do. You know, he's always slipping in these like, oh, poor me, and oh, don't hit me, and, you know, and then like the little humble bragging, you know. I'd love to quit, but I have 1 million followers. I can't disappoint them. Do I owe them a certain allegiance? Should I just abandon my account, or should I try to use it properly, whatever that means? I think it would be safer for me to leave Twitter. It would almost certainly be better for my mental health and ease of mind and conscience. Dude, you're mentally ill. Twitter, no Twitter, not going to make a damn bit of difference. These new technologies are by no means simple, and they are unforgiving. Actually, speaking as a 25-year game developer who has developed many games, voice recognition, artificial intelligence, etc., these technologies are pretty damn simple. Okay, I'll give you that, you know, handling the scale is difficult. But the reason that so many people have rolled out Twitter imitations over the past 10 years is because it takes about, you know, a month. So, but, you know, he's not a technologist. We'll let him slide on that. I'm not complaining. No, you're tap dancing. By the way, I have benefited greatly from their existence. Furthermore, he who lives by the sword. I conducted a straw poll during the Q&A after my last lecture in Colorado Springs, asking my audience to indicate by clapping if I should continue with Twitter, mild applause, or cease using it. Much louder applause. And these were definitely people who are positively predisposed to me. Should I take their advice? And if I don't, is it because I feel allegiance to my Twitter followers, or I'm afraid to be out of the loop? Okay, Jordan, I will explain it to you. They want you to get off of Twitter because they want you to actually give them more of the stuff that they want, which is actual advice, not this like public posturing, self-marketing thing that you're using it for. And the reason that you're resistant to quitting Twitter is because you live in fear of losing the influence that you've gained. Fine. But more importantly, you're addicted to the dopamine rush that the approval on Twitter gives you. See, I'm a game designer. I know how these things work. You know, when games like Candy Crush Saga and all the pay-to-play stuff, you know, the gamification, all of these things are designed to give you that same dopamine rush that Twitter, what do you call them, retweets and likes. It's essentially the same thing that appeals to gamblers. And so, because you are mentally ill, the Twitter addiction is going to be bad for you. You know, and so, you know, it's probably a good idea for someone like Jordan Peterson, who's mentally ill and who lives in fear, to get off of Twitter, because Twitter is really only positive for people who are more or less immune to that dopamine rush. Okay? I mean, I'm not on Twitter, although that was that was mostly involuntary, because I got kicked off twice, if I recall. I had like one long ban, and then they finally kicked me off for good. I don't even remember what it was, but you know, I'd already stopped using it before then, so I didn't really pay much attention. I've always thought Twitter is a terrible communications medium because it's so limited. You know, I prefer the longer blog form. I always have. But I'm not mentally ill. I'm not a narcissist, and I'm not a fame whore. I don't know whether Peterson's actually a narcissist or not, but he's definitely a fame whore, and he's definitely mentally unstable. So it's probably not a great idea for somebody like to be on Twitter. That being said, there's no way he's going to give it up, because someone like him lives in fear of losing it all. Okay? And so when somebody is in that frame of mind, they can't give it up. They can't step back. You know, it's that monkey in the, I can't remember what the monkey is supposed to put his hand in, but you know, the monkey puts his hand in, and he has to get his hand out, he has to let go of whatever he's grabbed in the jar, but he doesn't want to let it go. And so that's the position that not just Jordan Peterson, but a lot of people are in. And so I think that, you know, for the most part, you know, unless you're using Twitter to sell something, you know, it's probably not particularly good for the average person. You know, we don't permit our kids to be on social media, and so for precisely that reason, because they don't necessarily have the self-control to deal with that sort of thing. And so it's very clear that plenty of adults don't either. Anyhow, so then he goes on about how he attempted to clarify it on Twitter, and then he actually talks about people such as Gad Saad, Owen Benjamin, Kerry Strawn, and Scott Adams all offering their opinions, and reasonably so. See, this is where he's suddenly trying to like acknowledge the people with larger followings, because he's basically wanting them to notice, hey, Senpai noticed you, so please stop hitting me. That's the whole purpose of actually naming those names. You know, let's see. He mentions the Breitbart and Blaze, and how many people who are positively inclined readers, viewers, or listeners prior to this tweet took the opportunity to object. Blah blah blah. It takes very much to build a reputation and very little to destroy it. And if it's error that destroys it rather than falsehood, then no one is immune. Jordan, you're a fucking liar. I'm telling you that right now. You're a fucking charlatan. I know it. More and more people know it. They don't need to listen to me. They don't need to take my word for it. All they need to do is look at the lies and the intrinsic self-contradictions that you repeat over and over and over again. Okay? Anyhow, so then he goes on and on and on. Then today I wrote the present blog post as I indicated I would. Having said all that, I'd like to point out that I'm not claiming that the opinion I put forward, the alternative I offered, is or was correct. So what? We know it was wrong. You didn't even understand what Kavanaugh was nominated for. You're clueless. We know that you're wrong. Okay? The problem, you still haven't understood the problem. The problem is what your opinion revealed your true thoughts to be. That's the problem. Let's see here. Then in the spirit of noting I'm not necessarily correct, here's a list of some of the reasonable objections to my suggestion, blah, frickin' blah. It's all just, the obvious. These are all valid points, and they may well constitute the proper basis. Time will tell. Well, yes. Now he goes on to attack Kavanaugh. I will say that Kavanaugh compromised himself somewhat during this process. Okay, now here's where we're going to have some fun now. No doubt this claim will attract its share of criticism, but I don't exactly buy his explanations of his high school slang or his refusal to admit drinking to the point of being unable to remember. Jordan, it depends what the high school slang is. It depends what you mean by drinking to the point of being unable to remember. What do you mean by that? Jordan Peterson has no foundation whatsoever to doubt anyone else's words. He hides he can't even tell you what the truth is. To him, the truth is whatever helps you survive. By his own definition, whatever Kavanaugh said, in order to preserve the viability of his nomination, was the truth. So Peterson here is again revealing himself to be a charlatan and to be dishonest because he is directly contradicting his own definition of truth. The Darwinian truth, the imperative for survival for Kavanaugh at that point clearly indicated that he had to say whatever he needed to say about his high school slang or his drinking and so forth. And so, what Kavanaugh said was either the truth by the common dictionary understanding of the truth, or it was the truth under the Jordan Peterson endorsed Darwinian definition of the truth. Now, I was a little bit confused by, I didn't actually pay much attention to this kind of stuff because frankly, I thought the whole thing was total bullshit anyhow. But I also think he made a strategic mistake insisting upon the partisan nature of the nomination process, even though what he said was at least part accurate. It wasn't part accurate. It was entirely accurate. The vote was the most partisan, but one of the most partisan votes in Supreme Court nomination history. It was nearly a party line vote. There was one exception on each side. So when Kavanaugh said it was a partisan process, he was absolutely true. Now, the fact that, again, Peterson knows nothing about the Supreme Court. He knows nothing about American politics. He knows nothing about the history of it. And so who gives a shit what his strategic perspective on it is? Jordan, you're famous. That doesn't mean that that your opinion is the least bit qualified or meaningful in any way, shape, or form on pretty much anything outside of your field of expertise. And even there, you probably get it wrong because you're crazy. Let's see here. So now no one's perfect. Okay, yeah, fine. In closing, I have this to say. I am very glad I personally did not have to come to the decision that was formulated by the complex competitive interactions of the Senate. Oh, good. So he's glad. See, here's our gamma self-congratulation again. And then he says basically if people are upset, then they can vote in November. In absence of a better way of making decisions, and I don't see one, then the democratic method will do. Anyhow, look, I don't know what more you need to understand that this guy is a charlatan. I don't know what more you need to understand that this guy is a fraud. All right? We're going to continue to expose this guy as long as people continue to defend him. And he is going to continue to give us lots and lots of ammunition to use against him. And we know this because the way that he lies indicates that he knows perfectly well that he's lying. You can catch him out very, very easily, because whenever he starts talking about how he's thinking about something for the first time, it's very easy to find an example of when he's already addressed the subject. If he was smarter, he would stop trying to pull that routine, because you can't say that it's the first time he thought about something repeatedly. There's a limit to the number of subjects you can do that about. And so, anyhow, it's, I don't know. When people say, why do you keep pounding on Peterson? Why do you keep doing this? My answer is always very simple. Because you still believe him. And as long as people are telling me, commenting on my streams, leaving comments on my blog, attempting to defend this ludicrous, crazy charlatan, then I'm going to continue piling up the information. If you've ever read, if you're not familiar with The Irrational Atheist, have a look. Because what I did to Richard Dawkins, what I did to Sam Harris, who, by the way, clearly needs addressing one of these days soon. What I did to Michel Onfray and Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett, I will continue to do to Jordan Peterson. But it's more than just the fact that, exposing a charlatan. There's tons of intellectual charlatans out there. Why don't I pay this much attention to Ben Shapiro or the Weinsteins? Because they're less relevant. The reason that Peterson is relevant is his core objective. His core objective is to destroy nationalism. His core objective is to help erect a one-world government that will outlaw and prevent war. Peterson's goals are the same as all the globalists since the League of Nations. It's a false premise. It's totally wrong. And actually, it is the outline for a nightmare, the likes of which the human race has never seen. And if Peterson wasn't crazy, if Peterson had a better sense of history, he might realize that. Roberson says, Vox, are there any conversations or debates between you and Harris or Dawkins that I can share with confused friends? No, because other than Sam Harris, who, we did engage in a couple email exchanges, and I actually helped him polish the questions for that experiment that he did, which he wrote up in The Moral Landscape. If you look at that, anyhow, I've never debated any of them. None of these guys ever want to debate me. It's kind of funny because people say, "Oh, you should talk to Jordan Peterson. You should talk to him. He'll talk to anyone. He'll debate anyone." I was like, "Yeah, he's not debating me. I can tell you that right now." I would be astounded if Jordan Peterson was ever willing to debate me in any form, written, live, whatever. I'm happy to do it. I would absolutely love the opportunity to ask him a few questions. I don't even need the answers. I just need to see the look on his face after I ask them. And so, because what I'm trying to sort out with Peterson, I don't pretend to understand everything about him. But what I'm interested in understanding is how deep the crazy runs and why it's there. I have my suspicions. I have my ideas. I mean, clearly the guy is racked with guilt. Why? Clearly the guy is deeply, deeply terrified. Again, why? These are not these are not normal, even among the high IQ. And so, Peterson is like Shapiro, like Dawkins. Somebody just said Shapiro will debate any Trump supporter provided you can run faster than him. Yeah, actually, I mean, the funny thing is these guys are always talking about how I'll debate any Trump supporter. Like Matt, I think it was Matt Walsh was his name. It's like, I'll debate any Trump supporter. And so I said, okay, great, let's do it. He ran so fast, it was hilarious. So anyhow, yeah, but that's the thing is, you can't understand Jordan Peterson until you realize that all of his writing and most of his talking, he's addressing himself. Okay? And so the interesting thing is, what is the chaos within Jordan Peterson that terrifies him so much? Okay? We all have temptations to evil. We all know the appeal of evil. We've all given into it. We all know that voice of temptation. Okay? But only people that know that there's something deeply wrong with them are that terrified of their own capabilities. Are that terrified of their own capability for evil. Because, if you're dreaming about literally eating your cousin, and if you're dreaming about grandma rubbing her privates in your face, the chances are very good that whatever the call of the chaos inside you is saying is pretty ghastly. And so that's what's interesting. That's what's interesting about Peterson. I mean, a number of folks who are aware of these type of issues have suggested that he was probably molested as a boy. I don't know, but that would not surprise me in the slightest. And so, but these are things that, here's the most interesting thing. Compare and contrast Jordan Peterson with Moira Greyland. She wrote the book, The Last Closet. I edited it. It's horrific. It is so horrific that at one point in the first chapter, you actually have to laugh. I mean, I know it sounds strange, but I'm serious. I don't know anyone who can read that first chapter and get to this one specific part and not just involuntarily laugh, because it is that insane. You think things like people having sex with their sons and daughters and so forth at a very young age, you think that's unthinkable, right? Well, that's like the starting point for the unthinkable. I mean, it's literally beyond anything that any normal person even conceives. And so for someone to go through that, like Moira Greyland did, and come out of it a strong Christian, a true appreciator of beauty, especially when it comes to music, that is somebody who has, despite the horror of their childhood, despite the horror of their lives, has touched the grace of God and remained entirely sane. There's cracks, but the difference between the strength of a woman like Moira Greyland and the cowardly weakness and dishonesty of a man like Jordan Peterson is really, really striking. And, it's possibly it's possibly one of the reasons why I reacted so instinctively and negatively to just the first glimpse of Peterson's thinking, because the wrongness of it was readily apparent. So anyhow, thanks for tuning in, and I hope that if you happen to be a Jordan Peterson fan, that this at least will get you to take a look at the stuff that I'm talking about, okay? I'm not telling you to take my word for it. I'm not telling you that you should simply believe what I say. All I'm saying is that rather than rejecting it out of hand, rather than retreating to, calling me jealous and whatever, just look at what I've said and look at the evidence and see if what I've said is compatible with that. Don't retreat to your feelings. Don't retreat to, how reading 12 rules gave you a warm fuzzy, or how great you think it is that somebody stood up to the SJWs, like it's the first time anyone's ever done that. Just look at the evidence and decide on that basis. Because I think that if you do, you will see that my conclusions are not merely correct, but they don't even begin to cover the whole scene, the whole situation. So, have a good evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next Darkstream.